Welcome to this episode of Through the Year with John Wesley. I'm David Bell. Last time I spoke about how some of the first Methodist missionaries and clergy in New Zealand during the 1820s onward were amateur scientists. They had a knowledge of geometry, the natural world and science, which is what John Wesley would have wanted. But he also wanted the clergy and helpers to have a good knowledge of church history and tradition. Listen to what he says about each one of these in his 1765 curriculum for clergy training. Church history, quote, "Can any who spend several years in those seats of learning be excused if they do not add to that of the languages and sciences the knowledge of the fathers, the most authentic commentators on Scripture, as being both nearest to the fountain and eminently endued with that Spirit by whom all Scripture was given." Unquote. He means by the fathers, the great doctors of the church who wrote and often led the church during the first few hundred years after Christ. Wesley's just as interesting and insistent when he asked clergy to gain a knowledge of tradition. Here's what he said. Tradition, quote, "is not a knowledge of profane history, likewise of ancient customs, of chronology and geography, though not absolutely necessary, yet highly expedient for him that would thoroughly understand the Scriptures." Unquote. Two pivotal Wesleyan understandings arise out of this. First, here's our foundation for what Albert Outler called the Wesleyan quadrilateral. We'll examine this elsewhere in the series. And second is something which I think is even more crucial. John Wesley wants his clergy to read a vast range of facts and implicitly to commit much of it to memory. Biblical verses, theological arguments, history, science, spiritual improvements, and so on. As an undergraduate, he had to read, translate, and make occasional comments on obscure works. It was from these he developed his astonishing array of insights from many disciplines. His little note, Thoughts on Memory, has a paragraph well worth quoting. "You pronounce or hear a discourse or copy of verses which fixes upon your memory. Afterwards you can repeat in your mind the words you spoke or heard without ever opening your lips or uttering any articulate sound." Unquote. He can't account for it, but this kind of memory is an ever-present reality for Mr Wesley. Many a preacher who cannot anywhere near emulate these feats will appreciate Wesley's genius. Let's apply that today. The art of memory is key to being a Methodist leader. But how much is the art of memory alive in Methodism today? That's an open question. The liberal church, which key leaders brought into being in the 1880s, which stood its theological ground for a century, has largely vanished since the millennium. Is it a loss of institutional memory, or are other disruptions also at work? The clue will be found by returning to the clergy scientists of colonial New Zealand. See you next week, and thanks for watching.